The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the ice that instantly formed in my heart. One moment, we were having a perfectly normal Sunday dinner in the house I built with my late wife. The next, my son's wife, Serafina, was standing over me, her face a mask of rage, her handprint still burning on my skin. $50,000 is nothing to you, she'd shrieked, but it was her next words, hissed like a snake before she stormed out, that truly chilled me to the bone. They weren't just a threat, they were a promise of devastation. And I, Arthur Pendleton, at 72 years old, was about to learn that the foundations of my entire life were built not on solid rock, but on a lie I never saw coming. My life until that Sunday was one of quiet contentment. I live in the same sprawling Tudor-style house in northern Connecticut that my dear Helen and I bought 40 years ago. It's too big for one man, of course. The halls echo with memories of her laughter and the sound of our son, Michael, thundering down the stairs as a boy. After Helen passed from cancer 5 years ago, the silence became a companion of sorts. I kept myself busy with my garden, my woodworking shop in the garage, and managing the portfolio I'd carefully built over a 45-year career as a civil engineer. I designed bridges, structures meant to last for centuries. I believed in strong foundations. Michael was my world, my only child. He's a good man with a soft heart. Helen's heart, I always thought. He works as a university administrator, a stable but not exceptionally lucrative career. He was 40 when he met Serafina. She burst into our lives like a firework, dazzling, loud, and demanding all the attention in the sky. She was 10 years younger than him, a digital brand strategist and lifestyle influencer, whatever that meant. Her Instagram was a curated gallery of expensive restaurant meals, borrowed designer clothes, and tropical vacations she could never seem to afford on her own. From the beginning, my paternal instincts hummed with a low-frequency warning. It wasn't just her expensive tastes, it was the way her eyes would scan a room, not appreciating the warmth or the memories, but appraising the value of the art on the walls, the silver on the sideboard. When she looked at me, she didn't see a father-in-law, she saw a vault. Helen and I had been frugal. We saved, we invested, we planned. We weren't ostentatious, but we were comfortable. Very comfortable. This comfort, I soon realized, was what Serafina had married, with my son Michael being the convenient, adoring key to the lock. The small requests started almost immediately after the wedding. $1,000 to fix her car, which was always a late-model luxury brand. $5,000 for a career-defining conference in Dubai that yielded no discernible career benefits. $10,000 as a down payment for a new condo because their apartment was crushing her creative spirit. Michael would always be the one to ask, his eyes filled with a sort of pained apology. "Dad, Serafina's just so passionate. She has these big dreams, and I want to support them." I paid. I paid because I loved my son, and seeing him happy, or what I thought was happy, was worth the expense. I told myself it was just money, and I had more than enough. But with each check I wrote, I felt a piece of my hard-earned peace chip away. Helen and I had planned for our retirement, for Michael's future, for potential grandchildren. We had never planned for a digital brand strategist with a black hole for a bank account. The Sunday it all imploded started like any other. I'd spent the morning in the garden tending to Helen's prize-winning roses. Michael and Serafina came for dinner, a weekly ritual I cherished and dreaded in equal measure. I'd made my famous pot roast, the aroma filling the house with a sense of wholesome tradition that Serafina always seemed to find quaintly amusing. Dinner was pleasant enough. Serafina talked animatedly about a new social media platform, using a vocabulary of engagement metrics, synergy, and brand vertical integration that made my head spin. Michael just watched her, his expression one of complete captivation. Then as I was clearing the plates for dessert, a simple apple pie from a local bakery, Serafina clasped her hands together with theatrical glee. "Arthur, Michael and I have the most wonderful news," she announced, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Well, it's an opportunity, really, a life-changing one." I paused, the dessert plates in my hand. "Oh, what's that?" I've been invited on a cruise. She beamed. But it's not just any cruise. It's the Apex Influencer Summit at sea. It's an exclusive, invitation-only 3-week voyage through the Greek Isles on a brand new luxury liner. All the top lifestyle gurus will be there. The networking potential is, well, it's priceless. That sounds nice, I said cautiously. It's more than nice, Arthur. It's essential for my brand, she said, her tone sharpening slightly. The only issue is the cost of the sponsorship package. It's all inclusive, of course. The suite, the workshops, the private networking dinners, the content creation excursions. She slid a glossy brochure across the polished mahogany table. I picked it up. The pictures showed impossibly blue water, opulent suites with private balconies, and beautiful, smiling people clinking champagne glasses. I flipped to the back page and saw the price. My breath caught in my throat. I had to read it twice to make sure my old eyes weren't deceiving me. $50,000. I placed the brochure down gently on the table. The sum was obscene. It was a down payment on a house. It was a year's salary for a teacher or a nurse. It was more than my first home cost. $50,000, I said slowly, letting each word hang in the air. I know, she chirped, completely misreading my shock as excitement. An absolute bargain for what it includes. Michael and I were hoping you could help us with it. Think of it as an investment in our future. I looked at Michael. He was staring down at his lap, tracing the pattern on his napkin, the picture of a man trapped. He wouldn't meet my gaze. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't his idea. This was all Serafina. I took a deep breath, marshaling the calm and logic that had served me my whole life. The time for placating her, for buying a temporary peace, was over. This was a line in the sand, and I had to stand firm on my side of it. Serafina, I began, my voice even but firm. No! The smile vanished from her face so fast it was like a mask had been ripped away. No. What do you mean, no? I mean the answer is no. I will not be paying $50,000 for an influencer cruise. It is a frivolous and irresponsible expense, and I won't be a party to it. The air in the room turned cold. Serafina's eyes, which had been sparkling with feigned excitement moments before, now glittered with something hard and dangerous. This was the beginning of the end. The silence that followed my refusal was heavy and suffocating. It was broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock Helen had inherited from her mother. Each tick seemed to amplify the tension, counting down to an explosion I knew was inevitable. Serafina's perfectly made-up face contorted into a sneer. Frivolous? You think my career is frivolous? This is my work, Arthur. This is how I build our future, a future your son seems incapable of providing on his own. The insult directed at Michael was a low blow, designed to wound him and isolate me. I saw Michael flinch, but he remained silent, his gaze still fixed on the table. His passivity was a knife in my gut. Where was the confident boy I had raised? I think a $50,000 vacation is frivolous. Yes, I stated calmly, refusing to rise to her bait. If your career requires such an outlay, then your career should be able to pay for it. That's how the real world works. The real world? She scoffed, a harsh, grating laugh escaping her lips. You sit in this dusty old museum, hoarding the money you made in a world that doesn't exist anymore. Money is meant to be used, to be enjoyed. What are you going to do with it? Take it with you? That money, I said, my voice dropping, the calm giving way to a cold anger, was built over a lifetime of hard work by me and my wife. It was for our security, for our son's security, and for a legacy. It is not a slush fund for your vanity projects. Vanity projects? She shrieked, finally pushing her chair back and standing up. The movement was so abrupt it made the silverware rattle. I am trying to build a brand, a business, something that will make us millions. You are too old and too out of touch to understand. $50,000 is nothing to you. It's a rounding error in your accounts. You just don't want to see me succeed because you think I'm not good enough for your precious little boy. This has nothing to do with my opinion of you, I lied. It had everything to do with my opinion of her. This is about financial responsibility. It is a lesson Michael learned long ago. I finally looked at my son, a direct appeal in my eyes. Michael, tell me, do you think this is a reasonable request? Michael squirmed. He finally looked up, his eyes darting between me and his wife. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He was a man caught in a vice, and he didn't have the strength to break free. Dad, Serafina has worked really hard on this. It's important to her. His non-answer was a complete betrayal. He had chosen his side. Serafina saw her victory. She smirked at me, a cruel, triumphant twist of her lips. You see? Your own son understands. It's just you. You're a bitter, miserly old man. The words stung, but it was the insult to Helen's memory that broke my composure. My wife and I valued prudence and humility. We did not value wasteful extravagance. This house, this life was built on those principles. Principles you clearly neither understand nor respect. Oh, don't you dare bring St. Helen into this, she spat, her voice venomous. I'm sure she would have wanted her son to be happy. I'm sure she would have understood that sometimes you have to spend money to make money. You will not speak of my wife, I said, my voice a low growl. I stood up, my own anger now a palpable force in the room. We were now facing each other across the dinner table, a battlefield of linen and polished wood. I will speak of whomever I please, she screamed, her face flushed and ugly with rage. You are a selfish old fool. You would rather see your money rot in a bank than help your own family. You are not my family. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. They were brutal and perhaps unfair to Michael, but in that moment, I meant them. You are a parasite who latched onto my son to get to my wallet. That was it. That was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into slits of pure hatred. She moved faster than I could have imagined. In 2 quick steps, she was around the table. Before I could react, her hands swung through the air. Crack. The sound was sharp, shocking. My head snapped to the side and a hot, stinging pain exploded across my left cheek. My glasses flew off my face and clattered onto the hardwood floor. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. The tick of the grandfather clock seemed to mock the racing of my own heart. I slowly turned my head back to face her, my cheek throbbing, my mind reeling in disbelief. My son's wife had just struck me, in my own home. Michael finally shot to his feet. Serafina, oh my God! But he made no move toward me. He just stood there paralyzed. Serafina didn't look remorseful. She looked energized, empowered. Her chest was heaving, her eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. You want to talk about family, Arthur? She hissed, her voice low and menacing. You want to talk about the principles this family was built on? You have no idea. You have no idea. She leaned in closer, her face just inches from mine. I could smell her expensive perfume, a scent I would forever associate with this moment of violation. She lowered her voice to a whisper, but it carried more threat than any shout. You want to cut me off? Fine. Then find... She paused, letting the word hang in the air, twisting the knife. Then find out what this family is really built on. She straightened up, shot a look of pure contempt at Michael, and then turned and stormed out of the dining room. I heard the front door slam shut with enough force to shake the windows. I stood there, one hand on the back of a dining chair to steady myself, the other gently touching my burning cheek. Michael finally rushed to my side. Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. She's just been under so much stress. I held up a hand to silence him. The excuses were like sand in my mouth. I bent down, my old joints protesting, and picked up my glasses. Thankfully, they weren't broken. I slipped them back on. The room swam back into focus, but nothing looked the same. The familiar comfort of my home felt violated, tainted. Michael, I said, my voice raspy with a mix of pain and fury, you need to leave. Dad, please, let me explain. There is nothing to explain, I said, turning to face him fully. I saw the weakness in his eyes, the shame, and for the first time, I felt not just disappointment, but a profound pity for him. Your wife assaulted me in my home, and you stood there and did nothing. Go, now. He opened his mouth to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He looked like a lost little boy. He gave a helpless shrug, turned and walked out of the room, following his wife out of my house and, it seemed, out of my life. I was left alone in the echoing silence. The smell of pot roast and apple pie still lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of the peaceful life that had just been shattered. My cheek throbbed, but the real pain was deeper. It was the pain of betrayal. And as I stood there, her final, cryptic words echoed in my mind over and over again. Then find out what this family is really built on. What did she mean? It wasn't just an angry outburst. It was a threat. She was holding something over me, over us. It was a serpent's hiss, promising a poison I didn't yet understand. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul that I had to find out what it was. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a war. And I had just lost the first battle. The days that followed the slap were a study in silence. A cold, deliberate, weaponized silence. Michael didn't call. He didn't text. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and his 40-plus years of being my son had been erased. I knew Serafina was behind it. I could picture her whispering in his ear, twisting the narrative, painting me as the villain, the abusive old man who had driven her to a moment of madness. My phone, usually buzzing with a daily check-in from Michael or a photo of their dog, remained mute. The house grew quieter than ever before. The loneliness I'd learned to manage after Helen's death returned with a vengeance. But this time it was laced with the bitterness of betrayal. About a week after the incident, the next phase of Serafina's attack began. It was insidious and modern. My niece, Sarah, called me, her voice hesitant. "Uncle Arthur, are you okay?" I saw Serafina's new post. I don't follow her social media, Sarah. What post? I asked, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Oh, she said, clearly uncomfortable. Well, it's a long post about setting boundaries with toxic family members. She talks about generational trauma and financial abuse. She says some elders feel entitled to control their children's lives through money and that she's making a brave stand for her and Michael's independence. She didn't mention me by name, of course. She was too clever for that. But anyone who knew our family would know exactly who she was talking about. She had posted a picture of herself looking serene, a cup of herbal tea in her hands, with a caption that was a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. The smear campaign had begun. She was poisoning the well, turning family members and mutual acquaintances against me, one carefully crafted post at a time. She was framing her greed as a noble fight for autonomy, and my refusal as a tyrannical act of control. The anger I felt was a clean, hot flame. It burned away the fog of grief and shock. This woman wasn't just content to get what she wanted. She needed to destroy anyone who stood in her way. She had slapped me, isolated me from my only son, and was now attempting to assassinate my character. My engineering mind took over. For 45 years, I solved problems. I analyzed stress points, calculated load-bearing capacities, and looked for foundational weaknesses. An emotional response was useless. I needed data. I needed a strategy. Her words came back to me again, no longer just an echo, but a blueprint. Then find out what this family is really built on. It was a riddle, a threat based on a secret. She believed she held a trump card, something so powerful that it would eventually force me to capitulate. What could it be? My finances were transparent. My life with Helen had been an open book. We were not people with dark secrets, or so I had thought. My first step was to understand my enemy. I spent an entire afternoon going through Serafina's digital life. I created a dummy account and scrolled through years of her Instagram and Facebook posts. It was a nauseating journey through a world of fabricated perfection. Every photo was staged, every caption a hollow platitude about living your truth or manifesting your destiny. But beneath the glossy veneer, I started to see a pattern. There were pictures from before she met Michael. Vacations in Monaco, weekends in the Hamptons. She was always with a different group of people, always on the arm of a significantly older, wealthy-looking man. Then after a few months, that man would disappear from her feed and a new one would appear. It was a cycle. She was a professional. She wasn't just a gold digger, she was a serial prospector. And with Michael, she'd finally hit the motherlode, not through him, but through me. This gave me a theory, but it didn't explain her confidence. It didn't explain her cryptic threat. A history of dating rich men wasn't a secret that could destroy our family. There had to be something more, something specific to us. I started to think about my own life, my business dealings, my history. Had I made enemies? Of course, in my line of work, you bid on contracts. You competed. You sometimes had contentious partnerships. I thought back decades trying to recall any skeletons I might have forgotten. And then, a name surfaced from the depths of my memory. Marcus Thorne. Marcus had been my business partner for a brief, tumultuous period in the early 1980s. He was brilliant, charming, and utterly without a moral compass. We had a major falling out over a bid for a city bridge contract. I discovered he was using substandard materials from a supplier who was giving him kickbacks. It would have compromised the integrity of the entire structure. I confronted him, he denied it, but I had proof. I dissolved our partnership, bought him out for a fraction of what he wanted, and reported him to the engineering board. His career was ruined. He lost his license and, from what I heard, a lot of money. He'd threatened me at the time, sworn he'd get his revenge. But that was almost 40 years ago. I hadn't heard his name in decades. It seemed like a long shot, a paranoid fantasy. Could Serafina have some connection to a ghost from my distant past? How would that even be possible? The thought was unsettling. I needed more than just speculation. I needed a professional. The next day I made a call. I found a private investigator through a recommendation from my lawyer. His name was David Chen, a former NYPD detective with a reputation for being discreet and thorough. We met in a quiet coffee shop far from my neighborhood. I laid out the whole story, from the cruise to the slap to the cryptic threat. I told him about Serafina's social media history and my suspicions. I felt a little foolish even bringing up Marcus Thorne, a grudge that was nearly 4 decades old. Chen listened patiently, taking notes in a small black book. He didn't react, his face remaining impassive. When I finished, he took a sip of his coffee. "The threat is the key, Mr. Pendleton," he said, his voice quiet and direct. "Find out what this family's really built on. That's not random. It's targeted. It implies she knows something about your family's history, something you don't." "But there's nothing to know," I insisted. "My wife and I, we were ordinary people." "Everybody thinks they're ordinary until they're not," Chen replied, a hint of a wry smile on his lips. "Let me start with the girl, Serafina. Real name, Serafina Knight. I'll do a full background check. Financials, past associations, the works. I'll also look into this Marcus Thorne, see where he is, what he's been doing for the last 40 years. It's a thread. Let's see if it pulls on anything." I felt a sliver of hope. I was no longer alone in the dark. I was taking action. I wrote him a substantial check for his retainer. As I handed it to him, I felt a grim irony. I had refused to spend $50,000 on Serafina's fantasy. Now I was prepared to spend whatever it took to uncover her truth. Days turned into a week. I tried to maintain my routine, gardening, woodworking, reading, but a cloud of anxiety hung over everything. Every time the phone rang, I'd jump, hoping it was Michael, but it never was. Then one evening, Chen called. "Arthur," he used my first name, which I'd told him to do. "I have something. It's significant." "What is it?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Serafina Knight. She's in debt up to her eyeballs. Credit cards, personal loans. She's a financial house of cards. The lifestyle is a complete fabrication, financed by a string of lenders, and more recently by you. But that's not the interesting part." He paused. "I ran a deep dive on her associations. I found her mother's maiden name, and then I cross-referenced it with known associates of Marcus Thorne. And I pushed, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles were white. "And I got a hit," Chen said. "Serafina's aunt, her mother's sister, was Marcus Thorne's personal assistant for over 15 years, right up until he went bankrupt. There's a connection, Arthur, a direct family connection." The line went quiet as I absorbed the information. It wasn't a paranoid fantasy. It was real. The ghost from my past was standing right behind my daughter-in-law. But Chen wasn't finished. "There's more," he said, his voice grim. "Marcus Thorne didn't just disappear. He rebuilt. He got into real estate development under a different corporate name. He's very wealthy again. And for the past 2 years, there have been a series of regular, untraceable cash transfers from a holding company he controls to an account belonging to Serafina Knight." The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. This wasn't a random act of gold digging. This was a long con, a meticulously planned revenge plot 40 years in the making. Serafina wasn't just a parasite. She was a soldier, and Marcus Thorne was her general. They were coming for me, and they had used my own son as their Trojan horse to get inside my walls. But the central question remained. What was their weapon? What was the secret she was holding over me? What was my family really built on? The answer, I feared, was something far more devastating than financial ruin. The revelation that Serafina was in league with Marcus Thorne, my old nemesis, changed everything. This was no longer a domestic dispute over money. It was a siege. Thorne had spent decades nursing a grudge, and he had found the perfect weapon in Serafina, a woman who could infiltrate my life through my son's heart. The regular payments confirmed it. She was an agent on his payroll, sent to destabilize and ultimately destroy my family from within. I felt a surge of cold fury, but also a profound sense of dread. The nature of her threat, find out what this family is really built on, now seemed infinitely more menacing. Thorne wasn't just after my money. A man like him would want more. He would want humiliation. He would want to shatter the very foundation of my life, my legacy, my pride, my relationship with my son. David Chen, the PI, continued his work, digging deeper into Thorne's current operations, but I knew the answer wasn't in Thorne's business ledgers. It was somewhere in my past. Serafina's threat was personal. It was about family. I spent sleepless nights pacing the floors of my silent house, my mind a frantic labyrinth of memories. I replayed my entire life with Helen, searching for a crack, a hidden fault line. Our marriage had been good, solid. We'd had our share of arguments, of course. What couple doesn't over 50 years? But secrets? Betrayal? It seemed impossible. Helen was the most honest person I had ever known. My thoughts kept circling back to the period of my fight with Thorne. It was a stressful time. I was working long hours, consumed by the legal battle to dissolve the partnership. Helen had been my rock, my steadfast support. Or had she? My memory, clouded by the passage of 4 decades, struggled for clarity. Was there something I had missed? Days bled into one another. I felt like I was losing my mind, haunted by a ghost I couldn't see. I started going through old photo albums, boxes of letters, searching for anything out of place. It was in the back of my closet, tucked away in a dusty chest filled with Helen's things that I hadn't been able to part with, that I found it. It was a small brass key with a numbered tag, 314. I stared at it for a long time. I recognized it immediately. It was for a safe deposit box at our old bank, downtown. We had opened it together shortly after we were married to store our important documents, our marriage license, birth certificates, the deed to the house. But as our lives became more complex, we'd moved our main financial affairs to a bank closer to home, opening a new, larger box there. This old one, I'd completely forgotten it existed. We must have kept it open for sentimental reasons, paying the small annual fee without a second thought. I hadn't visited it since Helen died. I wasn't even sure what was still in there. A sudden, inexplicable urgency seized me. It was a gut feeling, an engineer's intuition that he's close to finding the structural flaw. The next morning I drove downtown. The old bank branch was still there, a grand building of marble and brass that felt like a relic from another era. After presenting the key and my identification, a stoic bank employee led me into the vault. The air was cool and still, smelling of old paper and metal. He retrieved box number 314, a long, thin metal container, and showed me to a private viewing room before closing the door behind him. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on top of a stack of familiar documents, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. My name, Arthur, was written on the front in Helen's elegant, looping cursive. My heart stopped. This wasn't an old document. This was a letter. From her. I picked it up. It felt heavy in my hands. The seal was unbroken. I could see the date written on the back. 2 months before she died. She had placed it here for me, knowing what? That I would find it one day? That I would need it? With a deep, shuddering breath, I slid my finger under the flap and broke the seal. Inside were several pages, filled with her handwriting. I began to read. My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and for that I am so sorry. I hope that years have passed, and your grief has softened into fond memory. But I also know that I cannot rest peacefully without telling you the whole truth. There is a secret I have carried for nearly 40 years, a burden that has been my solitary penance. I write this now, not to wound you, but because I have a terrible premonition that the past does not stay buried. And I fear that one day, you may need the armor of this truth to protect yourself and our boy. My blood ran cold. Our boy. You remember that terrible year when you were fighting with Marcus Thorne. You were so consumed, so stressed. You were fighting for your integrity, for our future, and I was so proud of you. But I was also so lonely. You were there, but you were absent. I felt invisible. Marcus, he was always charming. He would call the house pretending to want to speak with you, to negotiate, but he was really calling for me. He paid me attention, told me I was beautiful, that you didn't appreciate me. I was a fool, Arthur, a weak, lonely fool. It only happened once, a single afternoon of catastrophic weakness. I was filled with immediate and profound regret. It meant nothing, less than nothing, but it was a betrayal of you, of us, of everything we held sacred. I had to stop reading. The room was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Helen and Marcus Thorne, it was unthinkable. A physical blow could not have hurt more. I felt the foundations of my life, the very bedrock of my half-century of memories, cracking beneath me. I forced myself to continue reading, my eyes blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I ended it immediately. I swore to myself I would be the best wife a man could ever have to atone for what I had done. And then a few weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant with Michael. The words on the page seemed to lift off and hover in the air, mocking me. Michael. I was terrified, Arthur. I didn't know. I couldn't be sure who the father was, but I prayed with every fiber of my being that he was yours. And when he was born, and he had your quiet way in my eyes, I let myself believe it. I chose to believe it. He was our son. In every way that mattered, he was and is your son. You are the only father he has ever known. You are the man who taught him to ride a bike, who stayed up late helping him with his science projects, who showed him what it means to be a good, honorable man. Blood does not make a father, my love. A lifetime of love does. Marcus knows. After Michael was born, he must have suspected. He tried to use it as leverage, to blackmail me into speaking to you on his behalf. I told him to go to hell. I told him if he ever came near my family, I would ruin him, confess everything, and we would face the consequences together. He backed down, but I have never forgotten the look in his eyes. It was a look of pure malice. He is not a man who forgives or forgets. I am telling you this now because I am afraid. I am afraid that one day he will see an opportunity to use this knowledge to hurt you. He may try to poison Michael against you, or use it to take from you what you have built. If that day ever comes, I want you to know the truth from me. I want you to know that I loved you more than life itself, and my greatest sin was also the catalyst for my deepest devotion. And I want you to protect our son. Forgive me, my love, your Helen. I let the letter fall from my hands. It fluttered onto the table, a testament to a secret that had festered for 4 decades. The air in the small room was gone. I couldn't breathe. Everything was a lie. The perfect marriage, the bedrock of my life, was a fiction. And Michael, my son, was not my son. He was the son of my greatest enemy. In that moment, everything Serafina had done clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Her confidence, her arrogance, her cryptic threat. She knew. Thorn must have told her. This was the secret. This was the weapon they had been holding in reserve. Then find out what this family is really built on. It was built on Helen's secret, on her infidelity, on a lie. Serafina's plan was diabolical. She hadn't just married Michael for my money. She had married him to gain access to the one secret in the world that could bring me to my knees. The cruise, the money. That was just the pretext. She was trying to provoke me, to push me until she had an excuse to detonate this bomb and destroy me completely. She probably thought that if I knew the truth, I would disown Michael, leaving her free to manipulate him, perhaps even convince him to sue for a portion of the estate as Thorne's biological heir. I sat there in the cold, silent vault for what felt like an eternity, the silence a stark contrast to the screaming tempest in my soul. I felt a grief deeper than any I had known, even when Helen died. This was the death of a memory, the death of a shared history. But then, through the hurricane of pain and betrayal, Helen's final words in the letter echoed in my mind. Blood does not make a father. A lifetime of love does. I want you to protect our son. Slowly, methodically, a new feeling began to crystallize amidst the wreckage of my emotions. It was cold, hard, and sharp as a shard of glass. Rage. They had planned to destroy me with this secret. They thought it was my greatest weakness. They were about to find out they were wrong. They hadn't handed me a bomb. They had handed me a shield and a sword. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I put everything back in the box, locked it, and walked out of the vault. The man I was when I walked in was gone forever. The man who walked out was no longer a grieving father-in-law. He was a warrior, and he was going to war. Leaving the bank, I felt strangely calm. The shock had given way to a chilling, diamond-hard clarity. Marcus Thorne and Serafina had miscalculated. They thought the revelation of Michael's paternity would be my undoing. They saw it as a lever to break me, to force me to either pay for their silence or to shatter my own family in a fit of rage and shame. They didn't understand the promise I had made to Helen at her bedside. They didn't understand that my love for Michael was not a transaction based on shared DNA. It was a fortress built over 40 years, brick by brick, with love, sacrifice, and devotion. They were trying to dynamite a mountain. My grief for Helen's betrayal was real and profound, a new, raw wound I would have to tend to later. But for now, it was fuel. My priority, as she had begged in her letter, was to protect our son. And protecting him meant eradicating the cancer that was Serafina and cauterizing the threat of Marcus Thorne for good. I drove not home, but to David Chen's office. I walked in without an appointment. He saw the look on my face and immediately showed me into his private office, closing the door. I didn't say a word. I simply slid the cream-colored envelope across his desk. He read the letter, his face impassive as ever, but I could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, for the gravity of the situation. When he finished, he placed the pages carefully back on his desk. "This is the weapon," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "They think it's pointed at me, but the barrel is a mile long, and they're standing at the other end." "What's your play, Arthur?" "My background is in structural engineering, David," I said, leaning forward. "When a structure is threatened by a malicious force, you don't just patch the cracks. You trace the force back to its source and neutralize it. You reinforce the foundations, and you set a controlled demolition for the parts that are rotten. Serafina is the rot. Thorn is the source." For the next 2 hours we planned. We became architects of an endgame. My initial strategy of simply exposing Serafina was no longer sufficient. I needed to dismantle their entire operation and ensure neither of them could ever harm my family again. Our plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, the financial noose. Chen's research had shown Serafina was in a precarious financial state. She was a house of cards. I decided to give it a little push. We identified her 2 largest personal loans, the ones she was likely using for her day-to-day influencer lifestyle. Through a series of discreet inquiries made by Chen's financial contacts, we found that these debts were held by smaller, more aggressive lending firms. I did something I never thought I would do. Through a shell corporation set up by my lawyer, I bought her debt. All of it. Overnight, I became her creditor. She had no idea. The loan agreements had clauses for immediate recall if any evidence of fraud or misrepresentation in her application was discovered. Chen was already digging into her stated income on those applications. He was confident he would find discrepancies. The noose was ready. We just had to decide when to tighten it. Phase 2. The Thorne connection. Exposing that Thorne was paying Serafina was key. Chen's information about the wire transfers was good, but it was circumstantial. We needed irrefutable proof that this was a coordinated conspiracy. Chen put a surveillance team on Serafina. For a week, they followed her. She was careful, communicating mostly through encrypted apps. But then she got sloppy. She met Thorne. Not in a public place, but at a private airstrip outside the city. They thought they were being discreet. But Chen's team, equipped with long-range lenses, got everything. Crystal-clear photographs of Serafina getting into a car with Marcus Thorne. Photos of him handing her a thick manila envelope. It wasn't proof of the content of their conversation, but it was a tangible link that would be impossible for them to deny. They were co-conspirators, caught in the act. Phase 3, the human element. This was the most difficult part. This involved Michael. I couldn't just present him with a dossier of evidence against his wife and a 40-year-old letter that would shatter his identity. It would be too much, too cruel. He would likely retreat further, defending Serafina out of shock and a misplaced sense of loyalty. I had to reach my son. I had to remind him of the foundation we did have, the one built on real memories, not on a biological secret. After 2 weeks of suffocating silence, I reached out to him. Not with an angry phone call, but with a simple text message. Michael, I'm going to the lake house this weekend to open it up for the season. I could use your help. It's a two-man job, you know that. Just like we always used to. The lake house was our sanctuary. It was a rustic cabin I had built with my own hands, with help from my father. It was where I taught Michael to fish, to skip stones, to build a proper fire. It was where Helen and I had spent our happiest summers. Every plank of wood, every stone in the fireplace was imbued with a memory. It was our sacred ground. Serafina hated it. She called it primitive and had only been there once. For a whole day there was no reply. I began to think he would refuse. Then late that night my phone buzzed. A one-word reply, okay. It was a start. That Saturday he arrived at the lake house. He was tense and avoided eye contact. We worked in silence for the first hour, pulling the dust covers off the furniture, airing the place out. The awkwardness was a physical presence, a third person in the room. Finally, as we were standing on the dock, looking out over the calm water, I broke the silence. I miss your mother, I said simply. He visibly relaxed, the topic a safe harbor. Yeah, me too. She loved this place, I continued. She used to say the water washed away all the noise from the city, left only what was real. I looked at him. We haven't been real with each other lately, son. He finally met my gaze. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the misery. Dad, about what happened, Serafina, she's not herself. She's under a lot of pressure. I held up a hand. I don't want to talk about her. Not yet. I want to talk about you. Are you happy, Michael? The question seemed to break him. His shoulders slumped. I don't know, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. It's all so complicated. She has these big dreams, and I feel like I'm always letting her down, like I'm not enough. Is it her dream, or is it yours? I asked gently. He didn't answer. He just stared at the water. Your mother and I said, my voice soft. Our dream was simple, a good life, a safe home, a happy son. We didn't need much else. We had each other. That was the foundation. I let the word foundation hang in the air. I was planting a seed, reminding him of what was true before I had to reveal the lie. We spent the rest of the day working together, the old rhythm slowly returning. We fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen. We chopped wood for the fireplace. We talked about baseball, about politics, about everything and nothing. We didn't mention Serafina again. As he was leaving that evening, he paused at his car. Dad, I'm sorry for everything. I know, son, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. I love you. Never forget that, no matter what. He looked at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes at my tone, but he nodded. As he drove away, I knew he was still trapped, but I had managed to open a small window for the truth to get in. He was my son. He had a good heart, and I was counting on that heart to recognize the truth when he finally saw it. The pieces were now in place. I had the financial leverage. I had the photographic evidence of the conspiracy, and I had reestablished a fragile but crucial line of communication with Michael. I called my lawyer and told him to schedule a meeting. I didn't want a messy confrontation in my home. I wanted a sterile, neutral environment, a boardroom. My lawyer booked a conference room at his firm for the following Friday. I sent a single joint email to Michael and Serafina. Subject: an important family matter. I have instructed my attorney to arrange a meeting to discuss the future of our family finances and estate. Your attendance is required. Friday at 3 p.m., his office. Do not be late. The tone was cold, corporate, and non-negotiable. I knew Serafina would read it as a sign of my surrender. She would assume the old man was finally ready to negotiate, to open the vault to make the problem go away. She would walk into that room expecting a checkbook. She had no idea she was walking into a meticulously designed trap. The demolition was scheduled. Serafina strode into the sterile boardroom with the arrogance of a victor, expecting my checkbook to be open. She thought I had come to negotiate her price. She was wrong. I was there to foreclose. We're here to discuss your severance, I stated, sliding a portfolio across the polished table. It didn't contain money. It contained the truth, proof of her crippling debt, which I now secretly owned, and damning photos of her clandestine meetings with my old nemesis, Marcus Thorne, the architect of our ruin. Her face went pale as she realized the trap had sprung shut. But the final blow wasn't for her, it was for my son. I gave Michael the letter from his mother, the one revealing the 40-year-old secret of his paternity. As his world shattered, Serafina pounced, her voice a venomous shriek. He's not your blood, Michael. You owe him nothing. I looked my devastated son in the eye, my voice calm and steady. She is right about biology, but a lifetime of love makes a father. I taught you to ride a bike. I held you when you were sick. I am your father. In that instant, the truth became my shield, not her weapon. Michael saw her for the parasite she was. Defeated and exposed, Serafina was presented with an uncontested divorce and a non-disclosure agreement. She furiously signed away her claim to our family, her signature a testament to her greed. She walked out with nothing, leaving my son and me alone amid the wreckage, finally free to rebuild. In the aftermath, a heavy silence filled my home. Michael moved back into his old room, a ghost haunted by a truth that had shattered his identity. I gave him space, knowing the foundations of his world needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. Our healing began not with words, but with the familiar scent of sawdust in my workshop. We finished a birdhouse we had abandoned years ago, and in the shared quiet rhythm of our work, the bridge between us was reforged. That evening, he finally asked me the question that tormented him. Who am I, Dad? I looked at my son, the man I had raised. You are Michael Pendleton, I said, my voice firm with conviction. You are my son. A lifetime of love makes a father, and nothing can ever change that. As for the others, their karma was swift. Stripped of her funding and bound by an NDA, Serafina vanished into the obscurity she so desperately feared, her punishment being the ordinary life she disdained. A single letter from my lawyer to Marcus Thorne, alluding to the evidence we held, was enough to ensure that the ghost of my past was permanently exorcised. Freed from their influence, Michael thrived. He left his soul-crushing job to become a history teacher, finding a passion he'd long suppressed. Our relationship, once cracked, was now cemented with a painful but powerful honesty. The house is filled with life again, and our family, redefined by choice rather than blood, is stronger and more real than it ever was before. So that's my story. It's a story about how a demand for a $50,000 cruise uncovered a 40-year-old secret that nearly tore my world apart. But in the end, it's also a story about what family truly means. It's not always about bloodlines or shared DNA. It's about the choices we make every day. It's about showing up, about loving someone through their flaws, and about protecting them no matter the cost. Karma in my story wasn't just about my daughter-in-law getting her comeuppance. The truest karma was the painful, cleansing truth that allowed my son and me to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty, making it stronger than ever before. What did you think of Serafina's downfall? Was it karma enough? Have you ever had to face a shocking truth about your own family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I have more life stories to share, stories of betrayal, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of integrity. Thank you for listening.